Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, May 8th, 2025. Cardinal Robert Prevost from Chicago elected Pope at the Conclave at the Vatican, the first American to lead the Roman Catholic Church. He's taken the name Pope Leo XIV. President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announce a trade deal. U.S. House passes a bill to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, writing into law the president's executive order. The Senate votes not to advance a cryptocurrency bill aimed at regulating stablecoins after some Democrats who had supported the bill in committee switched to no. We'll talk about it with Julia Shapero, business and technology reporter with The Hill. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy outlines plans to overhaul and upgrade the air traffic control system. After the arrests of pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia University, State Department answering questions about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's post that the department is reviewing the protesters' visa status. FBI Director Kash Patel and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem testify before separate Senate Appropriations subcommittees about deportation and due process. And former President Joe Biden is on ABC's The View, denying that he had a mental decline in his last year in office. Eurovision covering the Vatican, announcing the moment today the world learned there's a new pope.
We have smoke in St. Peter's Square now, so we will come back, and it looks to be
white.
We have
look at that smoke streaming up.
This is good.
This is incredible news here, coming up here on 6:08 p.m. here in Rome at the Vatican, and we have white smoke streaming out.
Yes. And you can hear the crowds.
And we hear the crowds applauding there. As you can see, now we got the camera work on there.
Oh, wow. Just crowds of people crying.
It is amazing. Here we are.
And celebrating this special moment.
Yeah, it's so white.
Commentators on Eurovision. CNN writes that Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost of the United States has been elected the 267th Pope and has stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica as the new leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. He's now known as Pope Leo XIV. Prevost, 69 years old, from Chicago, Illinois, is the first ever Pope from the United States. In his first words as Pope, a visibly emotional Leo said to the crowd in St. Peter's Square, "Peace be with all of you." Addressing the crowd, Leo paid tribute to the late Pontiff Francis, urging the crowd to remember his predecessor's legacy before outlining his vision for the Catholic Church. Leo was chosen just 2 days after a group of 133 cardinals gathered in conclave to select a new pontiff. That timeline matches the previous two gatherings, suggesting that Prevost quickly impressed his peers during the secretive process. That was from CNN. Here's part of his first speech.
Questa è la pace di Cristo risorto.
Is the peace of Christ resurrected. It's a peace that's disarmed and disarming, humble, and will also persevere. And it comes from God, God who loves all of us unconditionally.
Ancora conserviamo
and
nei
let us
orecchi quella voce debole ma sempre coraggiosa
hear
di Papa
even the
Francesco,
weak voices. And Pope Francis, in fact, was always courageous, and he blessed Rome.
Il Papa che benediva Roma,
the Pope that blessed Rome gave his blessing to the world, to the whole world, on that Easter morning. So let us follow up that blessing. God loves us. God loves all of you. And sin will not prevail. We are all in the hands of God. And at the same time, without fear, let us be united, hand in hand with God and amongst ourselves. Let's move forward, because we are the disciples of Christ. Christ preceded us. The world needs your light. Humanity needs him just as a bridge in order to be able to get to God and to reach God's love. Help us. You must also help us and help one another to build bridges through dialogue, through meetings, and we all must be a single peoples, always living in peace. Thanks to Pope Francis. And I would also like to thank all my brother cardinals who have chosen me to be the successor of Peter and to walk together with you as a united church, always trying to find peace, justice, and always trying to work as men and women faithful to Jesus Christ, without fear, and to proclaim the evangel, and also to be missionaries.
Pope Leo XIV giving his first speech from the balcony to the crowd below in St. Peter's Square at the Vatican. He also spoke in Spanish. He worked for a decade in Peru, where he was appointed bishop and actually received Peruvian citizenship. President Donald Trump posting, "It is such an honor to realize that he is the first American pope. What excitement and what a great honor for our country. I look forward to meeting Pope Leo XIV. It will be a very meaningful moment." And at the State Department, this from spokesperson Tammy Bruce.
I would like to share a message from Secretary Marco Rubio following the election of a new pope and the first pope from the United States. Quote, "I extend my heartfelt congratulations to His Holiness Pope Leo XIV on his election as the 267th successor to St. Peter. This is a moment of profound significance for the Catholic Church, offering renewed hope and continuity amid the 2025 Jubilee year to over 1 billion faithful worldwide. The papacy carries a sacred and solemn responsibility. Jeanette and I are united in prayer for His Holiness. May the Holy Spirit impart wisdom, strength, and grace as He shepherds the Church. The United States looks forward to deepening our enduring relationship with the Holy See, with the first American pontiff."
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce at the State Department news conference. That message from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Many members of the U.S. House and Senate also posting congratulations. Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, writing, "Blessings to Pope Leo XIV, our first American pope, on his selection to serve as the Bishop of Rome. May he receive guidance from Jesus Christ our Lord and inspire the global community of Catholics and all people by sharing the message of God's unconditional love." And some messages as well from people in Chicago, where the Pope was born. Mayor Brandon Johnson, a Democrat, writing, "Everything dope, including the Pope, comes from Chicago. Congratulations to the first American Pope, Leo XIV. We hope to welcome you back home soon." And from former President Barack Obama, Michelle and I send our congratulations to a fellow Chicagoan, His Holiness Pope Leo XIV. This is a historic day for the United States, and we will pray for him as he begins the sacred work of leading the Catholic Church and setting an example for so many, regardless of faith. This is Washington Today. From USA Today, President Donald Trump touted a breakthrough trade deal between the U.S. and United Kingdom as he announced the first agreement since he imposed sweeping tariffs in April that ignited a global trade war and rattled financial markets. Joined in the Oval Office by U.S. and U.K. officials who helped broker the agreement, Trump said the pact would boost trade between the two allies and remove non-tariff barriers. He said unfairly discriminate against American products. That was from USA Today. Here is part of the president's remarks in the Oval Office.
With this deal, the UK joins the United States in affirming that reciprocity and fairness is an essential and vital principle of international trade. The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, especially in agriculture, dramatically increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers. And our Secretary, as you know, of Agriculture is here. Brooke, thank you very much for being here.
It's a good day. Thank you, sir.
You'll let the farmers know. In addition, the UK will reduce or eliminate numerous non-tariff barriers that unfairly discriminated against American products. But this is now turning out, I think, really to be a great deal for both countries, because it'll be really great for the UK also. So they're opening up the country. Their country is a little closed, and we appreciate that. They'll also be fast-tracking American goods through their customs process, so our exports go to a very, very quick form of approval, and there won't be any red tape. Things are going to move very quickly both ways. The final details are being written up in the coming weeks. We'll have it all very conclusive, but the actual deal is a very conclusive one. We think just about everything's been approved. So good for both countries, and we'll also receive new market access for American chemicals, machinery, and many other industrial products that weren't allowed, and they'll end up getting products that they'll be able to price, and if they like them better and we make great products, they'll be buying those products, but they were not available in the UK. Furthermore, in a historic step, the deal includes plans that will bring the United Kingdom into the economic security alignment with the United States. That's the first of its kind. So we have a big economic security blanket, and that's very important, and we feel very, very comfortable with that because it's been a great ally, truly one of our great allies. I mean, a lot of people say our greatest ally. I don't want to insult people by saying that, but I can say it's certainly one of our greatest, and right at the top, and they're the first one we're talking about. And by the way, we have many meetings planned today and tomorrow, and every country wants to be making deals. And we have a meeting, as you know, Scott will be going over to Switzerland on Saturday, and that'll be very, very interesting. We'll find out, but I think they want to make a deal very badly, too.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Again, from the USA Today article about this trade deal. Under the still evolving deal, Trump kept a 10% baseline tariff on British products imported to the United States, but he said that's a low number compared to the tariffs he wants to maintain for other countries. The agreement lowers 25% universal tariffs on automobiles from the UK to 10%, while the 25% rate still applies to vehicles from other countries. Trump also agreed to eliminate 25% tariffs on steel from the UK. Again, from the USA Today article. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined today's White House Oval Office meeting by phone.
This is a really fantastic, historic day in which we can announce this deal between our two great countries, and I think it's a real tribute to the history that we have of working so closely together. Can I pay tribute, Donald, to your negotiating team as well, particularly yes. Howard and Jameson, who've done an incredible job, a very professional job, and my team as well. Two negotiating teams have worked at pace now for a number of weeks to bring in this deal today. Really important deal. This is going to boost trade between and across our countries. It's going to not only protect jobs but create jobs, opening market access. And as you say, Donald, the timing couldn't be more apt, because not only was it 80 years ago today that victory came for Europe after and at the end of the Second World War, but of course on that day the UK and the US stood together as the closest of allies. And Donald, I think even down to the hour, because you may or may not know that it was about this time of day, exactly 80 years ago, that Winston Churchill announced victory in Europe, and that led to great celebrations across Europe, across America, but particularly in the United Kingdom. Literally people going out into the street, putting bunting up, going up to the palace, and so to be able to announce this great deal on the same day, 80 years forward, almost at the same hour, and as we were 80 years ago, with the UK and the US standing side by side, I think is incredibly important and makes this truly historic.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on the phone to the White House Oval Office meeting for today's announcement of a United States-United Kingdom trade agreement. One more paragraph from the USA Today article. It is unclear whether the deal with Britain, the ninth largest trading partner with the U.S., will provide momentum for future trade agreements as the Trump administration seeks to rapidly hammer out deals with 170 countries. The U.S. has a $12 billion trade surplus with Britain, making it an outlier from other countries like China that export more goods to the U.S. than it imports. And that was from USA Today. Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, ranking member of the Finance Committee, putting out a statement. When I heard the news about a quote-unquote deal with the UK, I was skeptical. After today's press conference, I still am. The details aren't even finalized. There's not much there. Howard Lutnick has said the 10% tariffs Trump slapped on the UK aren't even going away. That means American families and businesses are going to keep getting hammered with Trump's reckless global tariffs that are driving up prices. That was a statement from Senator Ron Wyden referring to the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. After the opening speeches in the Oval Office, President Trump took reporters' questions, including how large companies are responding to the new trade environment.
With companies like Ford and Mattel recently saying they're going to raise prices on certain products, how long do you think the American public is going to be patient and wait for you?
Well, I think they're saying that just to try and negotiate deals with me. Okay? They're not. Look, tariffs are the most misunderstood thing maybe in any form of business, anywhere in business. Oftentimes the country picks them up. Oftentimes the company picks it up. The people don't pick it up. Okay, the people don't pick it up. And if Ford did that, they wouldn't sell any cars. And if Mattel, I don't know, I'm not so sure. They also said they're the only country I've heard. They said, well, we're going to go counter. We're going to try going someplace else. That's okay. Let him go, and we'll put 100% tariff on his toys, and he won't sell one toy in the United States, and that's their biggest market. I heard that. I mean, I watched this guy talking about how I'm going to go counter. I said, well, I wouldn't want to have him as an executive too long. The Ford people I know very well. What they're doing is negotiating with us by saying that. But we don't think that's going to happen. Look, I put out a truth today, and it said that gas is down, gasoline is down, energy is down, groceries are down, eggs are down. I mean, eggs, thank you very much, but eggs are down.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office taking reporters' questions after the announcement with British officials of a U.S.-United Kingdom trade deal. Story from AP in a podcast. President Trump said he would make the release of a prominent Hong Kong businessman a part of his administration's trade talks with China. In an interview with Hugh Hewitt that aired Wednesday, Trump was asked about his promise to get Jimmy Lai out and said, I think talking about Jimmy Lai is a very good idea. We'll put it down, and we'll put it down as part of the negotiation. Lai is 77 years old and founder of the now-defunct Apple Daily newspaper known for its anti-Beijing stance. He's standing trial in Hong Kong on national security charges and could be jailed for life. That was from Associated Press. Wall Street today, the Dow up 254, NASDAQ up 189, and S&P up 32. Story from The Hill. Legislation to create a framework for payment stablecoins failed to clear a key hurdle on the Senate floor Thursday after several Democrats voted against moving forward with consideration of the bill. Coming up, we'll talk with a reporter who wrote that. First, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, on the Senate floor before this procedural vote.
Mr. President, hundreds of billions of dollars of stablecoins are in circulation today. The vast majority are dollar-denominated. But in the United States, stablecoins have operated in a legal gray zone. Stablecoin issuers trying to follow the rules can't be sure what rules to follow. The Biden administration chose to regulate crypto companies by arbitrary enforcement measures. Regulators filed numerous lawsuits against crypto firms. And these hostile actions led a number of U.S.-based companies to consider moving out of the United States altogether. Mr. President, I think we all agree the United States should be the world's leader in financial innovation. Stablecoins should be made in the USA. But we can't lead in innovation if there's no clarity for the innovators. The Genius Act provides that clarity. It's the first step in bringing digital assets into our financial system by setting a clear framework for stablecoins. To be clear, Americans are already using stablecoins and will continue to use them with or without this legislation. What this bill does is establish a framework that protects consumers and safeguards national security while promoting that innovation right here in the United States. The Genius Act would implement light touch and tailored standards for stablecoin issuers so consumers can trust who they're doing business with. Reserve requirements would give consumers confidence in the value of the stablecoins that they hold. And the bill's enforcement provisions would provide companies with clarity on what the rules are and ensure accountability for any violations. The Genius Act would also protect against national security threats and money laundering. Stablecoin issuers would be held to the same standards as other financial institutions subject to the Bank Secrecy Act. They would need to monitor and report suspicious activity. They would have to comply with U.S. sanctions. And they would have to block transactions that violate state and federal laws.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the Senate floor. A Senate procedural vote on this bill failed, 48-49, short of the 60 votes needed. Although we'll note that Leader Thune changed his vote from yes to no for procedural reasons. He can call for another vote in the future. Joining us now to talk about the stablecoin cryptocurrency regulation bill in the Senate is Julia Shapero, The Hill's business and technology reporter. Thanks so much for being with us. This bill came out of committee with bipartisan support. What has happened since to lead to today's vote?
Well, there's a couple different factors going on here. The biggest one on the Senate side is that on Thursday, Senate Majority Leader Thune moved to bring the legislation known as the Genius Act to the floor. And that move frustrated Democrats who felt that they were still in the process of negotiating and disagreed with some of the provisions, specifically on anti-money laundering, national security, and a couple of other things. And so they pulled their support, which was crucial here for this bill because, like you said, they can't get across the finish line without 60 votes.
What are the major provisions of this bill?
So this bill creates a regulatory framework for payment stablecoins, which are a type of cryptocurrency that is tied to an asset like the U.S. dollar to have a more stable price. Cryptocurrencies tend to be slightly more volatile than other investments. So they are they've generated more bipartisan support than other forms of crypto legislation.
Senator Warren posted today that Senate Republicans are trying to jam Democrats with a stablecoin bill that helps Trump rake in hundreds of millions of dollars just as he tanks the economy and raises costs for everyone else. How does that part fit in?
Yeah, so the president's expanding crypto portfolio is creating some problems for making it a little bit difficult for it to get across the finish line because it's really giving Democrats like Senator Warren, who have opposed this legislation, more ability to push back on it and encourage their fellow Democrats to oppose the legislation. In the House, we also saw Democrats walk out of a hearing earlier this week on market structure legislation for the digital asset industry over these concerns with the president's crypto ventures as well.
We're talking with Julia Shapero from The Hill. A lot of money at stake, I would assume. What kind of lobbying has there been on this bill?
I can't really speak to specific lobbying on this bill. I know that the crypto industry has definitely been very vocal about wanting to get the stablecoin bill across the finish line, and they did invest heavily in supporting crypto-friendly candidates in the 2024 election as well.
What is the state of cryptocurrency regulation in the U.S. now? In a sense, why would this bill be needed?
Cryptocurrency legislation doesn't necessarily exist currently in the U.S. So far, and that has been the biggest complaint for the crypto industry is that they feel there isn't enough regulatory clarity, and they argue that the Biden administration was unfairly targeting the industry without providing them enough clear rules of the road. So the goal of this administration and Republicans in the House has been to get two pieces of legislation across the finish line. Their goal is by August, although some have expressed doubts that will be able to happen on that timeline. But they hope to get the stablecoin bill and the digital asset market structure bill across the finish line for the industry.
So what happens next now that this procedural vote has failed today? When might we see another vote, if at all?
Well, it's not entirely clear yet, but The Democratic senators have expressed interest and have suggested that they were nearing a potential deal on new bill text to move forward with this. Senator Gallego asked today on the floor to delay the bill until Monday to give them some additional time to consider the new bill text. So there's a chance we could see this moving forward in the near future, but we will just have to wait and see.
Julia Shapero, The Hill's business and technology reporter. Find her stories at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And the bill named the GENIUS Act, that stands for Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act of 2025. Story from Associated Press. The Trump administration proposed the major overhaul of the U.S. air traffic control system on Thursday in the wake of recent deadly plane crashes and technical failures that have put a spotlight on the outdated network. The plan calls for 6 new air traffic control centers, along with technology and communications upgrades at all of the nation's air traffic facilities over the next 3 years, said Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. How much it will all cost wasn't immediately revealed. That was from Associated Press. Secretary Duffy spoke at a news conference at the Transportation Department in Washington. He was preceded by President Donald Trump, who phoned in, and while speaking about the plan, also criticized former Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who served in the Biden administration.
The ancient infrastructure is buckling under the weight of more than 1 billion flying passengers a year and supporting hundreds of billions of dollars. And Pete Buttigieg, who was the Secretary of Transportation, had no clue what the problem was. He had no clue, zero. But he wants to run for president. I don't think he's going to do too well. The federal government now pays $250 million annually just to keep up the old equipment, keep it running. And I guess you're having a big problem in Newark. That seems to be the one of the moment, the flavor of the moment.
President Donald Trump, part of the statement he gave as he phoned into today's Transportation Department news conference. Secretary Duffy then gave more detail about the air traffic control system upgrade plan.
We're going to rebuild some towers. We're going to rebuild some TRACONs. We're going to rebuild some centers. Not all of them, but we're going to rebuild a few of them that need to be rebuilt. So there'll be some bricks and mortar to this plan. However, everything else is really easy. Everything else that controls the airspace is going to be brand new. So we're going to have new telecom, new fiber throughout the system. We're going to have brand new radios in our towers to communicate between air traffic controllers and with airplanes. We're going to have a ground radar sensors, we'll have new radar for the ground and new sensors on our tarmacs and at our airports. So our air traffic controllers who are in the tower are looking out with binoculars to see airplanes. If it's cloudy or rainy, the weather's bad, it becomes very challenging. We want to have all the tools so they can see where aircraft are at the airport on their screens, on their terminals. We hear a lot of these bumps, these scrapes that are happening at airports. We want to make sure air traffic controllers have the tools to keep airplanes separated, and we want to allow them to see that through their panels and screens. We're going to have a new flight management system that's going to bring efficiency to the airspace. So more people are flying, more planes are in the air now than ever. We're going to add eVTOLs. These are the Ubers in the air, the drones with people in them, as well as drones themselves into the airspace. It's going to become more complicated. This is going to allow us to better manage the airspace, to allow the airlines to better manage their flights. So when you take off, you actually fly and you land. You don't circle airports. You're going to take off and you're going to fly directly. This system will allow that efficiency to take place in the airspace. So in essence, all the front-facing equipment for controllers, all the back-end systems for controllers, all brand new. All new hardware, all new software is going to be built into this brand new air traffic control system.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy at today's news conference at DOT in Washington. Also there, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, the Commerce Committee Chair, and representatives from Boeing and the Airliners Trade Group. Again, from the Associated Press article, the proposal sets out to add fiber, wireless, or satellite technology at more than 4,600 locations, replace 618 radars, and more than quadruple the number of airports with systems designed to reduce near misses on runways. 6 new air traffic control centers would also be built under the plan. And the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee estimated last week that it might cost $12.5 billion to overhaul the air traffic control system, again from Associated Press. Story from Politico. President Donald Trump's new pick for Surgeon General, wellness influencer Casey Means, is already the target of MAGA vitriol, underscoring a split inside the president's base over the future of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again movement. Trump's decision to select Means came just hours after news broke about his decision to withdraw Jeanette Newswat, a former Fox News contributor for The Post. That was from Politico. President Trump was asked about it today.
You just announced a new nominee for the U.S. Surgeon General who never finished her residency and is not a practicing physician. So can you explain why you picked her to be America's top doctor?
Because Bobby thought she was fantastic. She's she's a brilliant woman who went through Stanford, and as I understand it, she basically wanted to be an academic as opposed to a surgeon. I think she graduated first in her class at Stanford, and Bobby really thought she was great. I don't know her. I listened to the recommendation of Bobby. I met her yesterday and once before. She's a very outstanding person, a great academic, actually. So I think she'll be great.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Laura Loomer, who criticized the first pick for Surgeon General, has now also gone after the second, posting in all caps between red alert emojis. President Trump's pick for U.S. Surgeon General Casey Means said she prays to inanimate objects, communicates with spirit mediums, uses shrooms as plant medicine, and talks to trees. She also doesn't even have an active medical license. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. writing on X, the absurd attacks on Casey Means reveal just how far off course our healthcare conversations have veered and how badly entrenched interests, including big food and its industry-funded social media gurus, are terrified of change. Also, a story from the Washington Post. President Donald Trump said Thursday he will replace interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin, his embattled nominee to serve as the top prosecutor for D.C. after 15 tumultuous weeks in office marked by his threats to investigate Trump's perceived political adversaries and firings and demotions of career prosecutors who investigated the president and the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol attack. Addressing reporters, President Trump praised Martin and expressed disappointment at the Senate's refusal to advance his nomination. That was from the Washington Post. Washington Today continues in a moment.
If you ever miss any of C-SPAN's coverage, you can find it anytime online at cspan.org. Videos of key hearings, debates, and other events feature markers that guide you to interesting and newsworthy highlights. These points of interest markers appear on the right-hand side of your screen when you hit play on select videos. This timeline tool makes it easy to quickly get an idea of what was debated and decided in Washington. Scroll through and spend a few minutes on C-SPAN's points of interest.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. The Republican-led House voted Thursday to codify President Donald Trump's Gulf of America executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico. Starts an ABC News article. It goes on. It passed with a 211 to 206 vote, with Congressman Don Bacon as the only Republican to vote against the measure. The legislation, which was introduced by Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, codifies an executive order from President Trump to rename the body of water. From ABC News, Congresswoman Greene spoke during the House floor debate.
The Gulf of America is one of the most important things that we can do this Congress. This is an executive order written by the President of the United States, which, by the way, is president today because the American people rose up and voted against a Democrat Party that was completely America last. Section 1 of the executive order lays out the purpose and policy and directive stating, it is the national interest to promote the extraordinary heritage of our nation and ensure future generations of American citizens celebrate the legacy of our American heroes, the naming of our national treasures, including breathtaking natural wonders and historic works of art, should honor the contributions of visionary and patriotic Americans in our nation's rich past. Americans have watched Congress week in and week out rename post offices. Democrats vote for it all the time. Democrats aren't afraid to rename anything. They've been renaming military bases because they hate our history and hate our heritage. This is also the same Democrat Party that cheered when their ground troops, Antifa, and radical rioters went throughout American cities and tore down statues like Lincoln and Washington. The Democrat Party doesn't want to preserve America's rich history or promote pride in our country, our lands, our people, our businesses, and yes, our waters, the Gulf of America. The Democrat Party wants to remain the best business partner to the cartels that they've ever had. It's the cartels that have been enriched by tens of billions of dollars because of Democrat policies, and they'll continue to protect them and fight for them.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, on the House floor. The bill reads, any reference to a law, map, regulation, document, paper, or other record of the United States or the Gulf of Mexico shall be deemed to be a reference to the Gulf of America. Congressman Steny Hoyer, Democrat of Maryland, opposed the bill and said during floor debate there are much more important issues the House should be working on.
Live from Washington, D.C., Saturday Night Live. You can't make this up. Mr. Speaker, I rise in perplexion. I first want to say how much respect I have for Mr. Westerman. He is my dear friend and one of our best members. My. Doing a lot of work this time, Bruce. Is this infantile bill to rename the Gulf of Mexico really this House's top priority? I heard the gentlelady say it's going to solve all the problems, of course, if we name it the Gulf of America. Golly day, why didn't we think of that? The economy is shrinking for the first time since COVID-19. Costs are going up. I think Saturday Night Live just called me. They want me on. Costs are going up. Small businesses are going under. American families are worried they won't be able to keep the lights on, keep food on the table, and keep the roof on their head. They're happy about, of course, Gulf of America. That'll do it. Millions of Americans risk losing their health insurance if Republicans' Medicaid cuts go through. Yet Republicans think this juvenile legislation is the best use of this House's time. This is the only thing we're doing today, folks.
Congressman Steny Hoyer, Democrat from Maryland, on the House floor. The House passed this bill 211 to 206, sending it to the Senate. Congressman Jimmy Patronis, Republican of Florida, writing on X, with House passage of H.R. 276, creating the Gulf of America, I am inviting President Trump to the Florida Panhandle for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. This naming will provide the region with tremendous economic growth. Columbia Spectator, the student newspaper of Columbia University, has an article. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the federal government is reviewing the visa status of the trespassers and vandals who took over Columbia University's library in a Wednesday post on X condemning a pro-Palestinian protest in Butler Library. Pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our great nation, Rubio wrote. About 100 protesters staged a protest in Butler. At around 3:15 p.m., New York Police Department officers arrested around 75 protesters at around 7:25 p.m. and led them out of the library into NYPD buses on 114th Street, marking the largest mass arrest on campus since the NYPD arrested 109 protesters during a sweep of occupied Hamilton Hall and the Gaza Solidarity encampment in April 2024. Reporting from the Columbia Spectator, today State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce at her news conference in Washington asked about this.
Following the demonstrations yesterday from pro-Palestinian protesters in Columbia University's Butler Library, the Secretary also treated that the Trump administration would be reviewing the visa status of the individuals involved. Can you say anything more on that? Is that review underway? And if so, have any of the visas been revoked?
Yes, the Secretary had noted that regarding the vandalism, the violence, the holding of that room, that those individuals would be looked at regarding their status and what was happening. And I believe that is ongoing. So if there is a dynamic, also he noted that Hamas supporters are not going to remain in this country. and that action would be taken there. So certainly he's been consistent. He means it. And in this particular case, you had people arrested, and that building was reopened. And I think that the nature of our promise that people who are in this country with a visa and who do not follow our laws or affect the nature of what's important to our country when it comes to our foreign policy and national security will be acted on in that regard. And yes, he said it, and I believe him, and that's the word you can take for it, I think.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce at today's news conference in Washington. Columbia University's acting president Claire Shipman posted a video Wednesday night after the arrest of the protesters.
What happened today, what I witnessed, was utterly unacceptable. I spent the late afternoon and evening at Butler Library as events were unfolding to understand the situation on the ground and to be able to make the best decisions possible. I arrived to see one of our public safety officers wheeled out on a gurney and another getting bandaged. As I left hours later, I walked through the reading room, one of the many jewels of Butler Library, and I saw it defaced and damaged in disturbing ways and with disturbing slogans. Violence and vandalism, hijacking a library, none of that has any place on our campus. These aren't Columbia's values. Let me be clear. Columbia unequivocally rejects anti-Semitism and all other forms of harassment and discrimination. And we certainly reject a group of students, and we don't know yet whether there were outsiders involved, closing down a library in the middle of the week before finals, forcing 900 students out of their study spaces, many leaving belongings behind. Our commitment to a safe, inclusive, and respectful campus community is unshakable, and we will continue to act decisively to uphold these values.
Columbia University acting President Claire Shipman in a video Wednesday night. AP writes that Israel's ongoing blockade of humanitarian assistance for Gaza forced a leading aid group to shut its community soup kitchens Thursday as it faced empty warehouses and no replenishment of supplies in the war-battered enclave. World Central Kitchen was serving 133,000 meals per day and baking 80,000 loaves of bread over the past weeks, but said it was forced to suspend operations since there is almost no food left in Gaza for the organization to cook. That was from AP. And from Reuters, a top Democratic lawmaker has asked the Pentagon's Inspector General's office to investigate whether the U.S. military broke the law when it deported 17 migrants to El Salvador at the end of March without any U.S. government civilians on board. That letter coming from Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, the Armed Services Committee ranking member. Both the FBI Director Kash Patel and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem were asked today about deportations during testimony before separate Senate appropriations subcommittees. First, Director Patel, questioned by Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon.
There's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution? It says all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no person.
It doesn't say that.
It does say no person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it, because it's also been affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. In the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status. The Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. But it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
FBI Director Kash Patel questioned by Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, at today's Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. A story from Reuters about the hearing. Director Patel told the U.S. Senate panel that he supports a White House proposal to cut the Bureau's budget a day after telling lawmakers he wanted $1 billion more than the administration had requested. Patel said, "My view is that we will make and agree with this budget as it stands and make it work for the operational necessity of the FBI. As the head of the FBI, I was simply asking for more funds because I can do more with more money." That was from Reuters. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, at a different Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, was also asked about deportations by Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut.
If someone is a legal permanent resident of the United States, I'm not talking about an H-1B or a student visa holder, I'm talking about a legal permanent resident. If you are a legal permanent resident, do you have the right to detain or deport that person simply for expressing their political opinion?
The Department of State makes those decisions.
No,
the
they
Department
don't.
of Homeland Security.
You make that decision about who you have the right to detain or deport. So you are involved in that? Do you believe the United States, do you believe the law allows?
The Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration is enforcing the law, following the constitutional rights of folks who are here as citizens, those who are here legally, and those who are here illegally.
So a legal permanent resident is by definition here legally. Do you believe, I think this is really troubling if you can't answer this simple question. Do you believe that the U.S. government can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion that the administration disagrees with?
The determination you're asking for is based on things that you are determining that the Secretary of State has considered and evaluated. We don't evaluate that, the administration, along with the partnership with the Department of State, on what is political speech and what's an affiliation with a foreign terrorist organization.
Do you believe?
That's the difference between the two that you're asking.
That you can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion?
We have not detained we have not deported anybody who's a legal permanent resident or citizen of the United States.
Then say you don't have the ability to do that.
We have
clarify that for the millions of.
That is exactly what I'm doing, is that we have followed exactly what the law is, and that we have not detained or deported anybody who's a citizen or has legal status in this country. We are focused on the worst of the worst dangerous criminals.
You do not believe you have
to get them out of the country.
You do not believe you have the ability to do that.
We have not done that at all, and the Trump administration has no plans to do that.
You haven't done it doesn't mean that you won't do it in the future.
We are following
do you believe you have the ability to do that or not?
That we are doing.
I think you were going to.
The exact appropriate thing in partnership with the Department of State and in partnership with the Trump administration.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, questioned by Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, at today's Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on the department's budget. Story from Politico. The head of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, was fired Thursday morning, according to two people with direct knowledge of the situation. Cameron Hamilton, FEMA's acting administrator, has told people that he was terminated, leaving the nation's disaster agency without a top official 3 weeks before the start of Atlantic hurricane season, and as Congress scrutinizes FEMA's proposed budget for fiscal 2026. The firing occurred one day after Hamilton told a House Appropriations Subcommittee that the nation needs FEMA, which Trump has suggested abolishing or shrinking. Reporting from Politico. Story from ABC News. Former President Joe Biden on ABC's The View on Thursday railed against President Donald Trump's second term so far and said he took responsibility for Trump's historic return to the White House. Joe Biden and former First Lady Jill Biden joined the co-hosts live in studio for their first joint interview since leaving the White House. That was from ABC News. Here's one of the questions posed to the two.
Mr. President, since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. In the final year of your presidency, what is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. There's nothing to sustain that, number one. Number two, think of what we were left with. We were left with a circumstance where we had an insurrection when I started, not since the Civil War. We had a circumstance where we were in a position that the pandemic, because of the incompetence of the last outfit, end up over 1 million people dying. And we're also in a situation where we found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues, and which I won't go into in the interest of time. And so we went to work, and we got it done. And one of the things that
Alyssa, one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us, and they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day. I mean, he'd get up, he'd put in a full day, and then at night I'd be in bed, reading my book, and he was still on the phone, reading his briefings, working with staff. I mean, it was nonstop.
Former First Lady Jill Biden and former President Joe Biden today on ABC's The View. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.